Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger. Welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Today is December 2nd, 2020. And as you probably know, we still don't have a determination on the presidential fight in the United States. The media is sticking by its story that it already proclaimed Biden the winner, but the president is still fighting. There are battles in a number of legislatures. Many people around the country and, in fact, around the world are watching this to see what happens. Helga, what's the latest that you have?
Well, as you say, the media declared Biden the winner, but, it's a very confusing picture, especially for people who are not living inside the United States, because, the electoral system in the United States has many specifics, which foreigners, for example, have a hard time to understand. So while, for example, in the state of Arizona and Wisconsin, the Secretary of State in each case has certified the election, but the legal battle is still going on because there are many people who say that there was fraud, that you have many witnesses with affidavits, and there is clearly an effort to take the challenge to the certification to the Supreme Court. Then in Michigan, there's also massive reporting by poll watchers that they were prevented from having access, massive ballot stuffing, personal threats, also a lot of people with affidavits. Then in Wisconsin, also the Trump campaign has launched a lawsuit to try to declare 221,000 votes illegal. Then in Arizona, there was a 7-hour hearing in the state legislature. Afterwards, Representative Mark Fisham is calling for withholding the state's electoral college and not release the electoral vote, which is, according to the Constitution, absolutely their right to do. Then in Arizona, the Supreme Court Judge Randall Warner, he allows 100 signatures taken at random, selected on the early ballots, and have them compared with the signatures on file to see if they match. In Nevada, the judge allows for the inspection of the election equipment and sealed containers, not allowing that the information therein is being erased. Now, that is all, going on. It's not yet decided. Then you have naturally the suit by Sidney Powell, but that did not prevent William Barr, the Attorney General, to say, no, this is not enough fraud to overturn the election. Now, that puts more a question on Barr than what he is saying, because this was already the concern Bill Binney had expressed many weeks ago, where he said that the fact that Barr and Durham did not produce the result of their investigation before the election was putting high question marks on who are these people really working for. And Giuliani, Trump's lawyer, naturally immediately said that the argument that the Department of Justice investigated all these claims, that there was not even a semblance of an investigation on the side of Barr. So all that means is, that President Trump is really in an incredible environment, where people he thought may be on his side then turn out to be, whatever you want to call them, but being not on Trump's side at all, but working for the other side. So I think that this is an incredible situation, and since this is not an inner American affair, because it immediately affects war and peace, Southwest Asia, what happens to Africa, what is the relationship with Russia and China, how the whole world will evolve. I think, there must be absolute concern that this battle is being, decided in the favor of Trump. I think he has still a lot of things he could do. He's still president. On the 14th is the Electoral College. That's in 12 or so days from now. So that period remains. But then he can do a lot of other things. He can call a special prosecutor, which he has already hinted he may do. Then he could call, and this is something you brought in the discussion, Harley, first, and I totally back it up, that he should immediately pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, guarantee their safety, their life, bring them back to the United States, and have them testify, because they know, where the skeleton is buried. And in the case of Assange, it is super urgent, because now, apart from the fact that the whole world knows that he was slowly being tortured by the British in the jail he is now, the news is that in Balmesh, the jail he presently is kept, there was an outbreak of COVID, and that they did not separate the infected and the non-infected people who are in this jail. So his life is doubly in danger, and Trump would not only save Assange's life, but he also could spill the beans on what is really the essence of the of the accusation, Russiagate. So I would really urge all our viewers that you should support this. You can retweet, you can send it out in all possible ways. Build support for Assange to be saved from the British effort to kill him.
I want to go back to the thing with Attorney General Barr for a second, because what Giuliani pointed out, which I think is really significant, is that after they provided the Justice Department with lists of witnesses who provided affidavits, he said not one of those witnesses was interviewed by Justice Department officials when they presented evidence of experts who testified that the machines that were used could be tampered with through a backdoor or through the internet. Not one machine was inspected. Now, in Nevada, they're going to be inspecting some of the equipment, but this is part of the fight. Now, to go back to Barr, there's a very interesting thing that came up this morning or yesterday, which is that Barr admitted now that back in October, on October 19th, he gave special prosecutor powers to Durham, which means he could bring federal charges against the people he's investigating. The question there is, if they really wanted to find out what Russiagate is about, why did they wait so long? And why has nothing been done yet? Do you have any thoughts on that, Helga?
Well, I think, some people were very excited about Barr early on. I always had my doubts, because I thought that he has a sort of a funny aspect to himself. And, I really think that the connection to the Bush family is also in the past something one has to consider. So I think, I think Trump would be well advised to not count on these people at all anymore, and go for the immediate special prosecutor, declare all the documents declassified, and order them to be published. As a president, he has the power to do so, and use the flank with Assange and Snowden, and really, draw the conclusion out of what has been his environment.
Now, on the Assange question, there's something else that came up which is quite significant. Assange what was his crime? He exposed war crimes. And under US law, you cannot classify criminal activity, that exposing it is totally allowed. Well, something has just come out in terms of the Australian forces. That's a very big scandal in Australia right now, which is along the lines of what Assange was exposing, isn't it?
Well, that is unfortunately, obviously happening. It happened in Iraq. It happened in Afghanistan, and now basically the Australian military also was caught killing 29 of completely, innocent civilians in Afghanistan. Now, you can. That is what happens when you have these meaningless wars. I mean, a war which has been going on since 20 years, and the situation now is worse than it was before. Uh, I think this all sheds a light. I mean, I must really say that when I hear that the West is defending democracy and human rights, I mean, if you look at the list of things which are coming out now, you have this atrocity with the Australians, what Assange revealed, which was, he should be celebrated as a whistleblower, as a hero, and not as somebody who is giving away state secrets. I mean, this shows a completely upside down sense of what is right and what is wrong. And then you look at the absolutely disgusting uh, scandal which now came out in terms of the EU participation in the Frontex pushback of migrants in the Mediterranean. There is now a demand that the head of Frontex, Leggeri, should resign. I think he should be also prosecuted for having covered up at least these things going on. I think this puts into a big question the so-called values of the free democratic Western world, because I think the ugly truth is quite different.
You just wrote a statement in which you quoted from Putin at the Valdai conference when Putin said one of the problems with the West is the complete absence now of traditional values. I'd like you to discuss that in the context of what you were just saying, that we're now having people openly stating this is the worst crisis since World War II in the United States, since the Civil War. And this really is a question of values and the notion of the image of man. And that's the theme, or one of the themes, of the Schiller conference coming up.
Yes, the head of the United Nations, General Secretary Guterres, said there is the immediate threat to 160 million people of dying of COVID and famine. Beasley from the World Food Program, basically pointed out to the fact that you have a raving catastrophe in the poorest of the countries. Um, I mean, Guterres said 35 billion are necessary to remedy that. You know, I think what we need is a complete change in the orientation. There needs to be a food airlift, vaccine airlift, medical supplies, and a beginning of an industrialization of the countries which are now completely defenseless. Now, that will be, as you say, one major subject of our upcoming Schiller conference in the context of building the Committee for the Coincidence of Opposites, meaning that you have to find a solution which addresses everything: the crisis of agriculture, the famine, the need to double the agricultural production worldwide, the need to have a world health system, a national health system in every country, constituting a functioning world health system for all of humanity. So that needs to be done. And it's also very clear that if Biden would come in, the chances to do that would be so much worse because, I mean, if you look at the transition team and if you look at, for example, this guy, James Jeffries, who was the special envoy for Syria, I think, he just briefed the Biden transition team on Syria, and he said that the new administration will correct the mistakes which were made by the Obama administration. And we know that I think it was Blinken who disagreed with Obama that he did not bomb Syria and attack Syria militarily at the time. So what is immediately on the horizon, that a renewed effort to make war in the Middle East, against Syria, would be on the horizon. Naturally, then you can forget about treating the people in Yemen who are in immediate danger of starvation. And naturally, the Middle East, Southwest Asia is a tinderbox as it is after the assassination of the head of the nuclear program in Iran. And now they killed another commander, an Iranian commander. So, it's all set to create a trap for Trump to do some military action. Even, for example, if Iran would hit some US troops in the Middle East or some Israeli target, then you had a counter reaction involving the United States, and you could immediately have a strategic crisis as we had it when Soleimani was killed at the beginning of January. And when we called for the summit of the major nuclear powers, US, Russia, and China, to have an immediate de-escalation of the danger of going to war, but also have a forum where the major powers of this world can discuss the major challenges, the danger of a financial collapse, the need to have a new Bretton Woods credit system, to really, find ways of a new international security architecture. All of these are incredibly pressing issues. And this is why I think also, with this present situation, Trump should positively answer to Putin's restated intention to conduct this Peace P5 summit, this time with all the permanent members of the UN Security Council, as quickly as possible. Because if he would now, if President Trump would now listen to what some more positive forces from the military are also now saying, that in order to solve this incredible famine and COVID crisis, you need the logistics of the military. And these forces should work together with Russia and China and not go in a geopolitical confrontation. But, if that would happen, if the United States, Russia, China would now work together to alleviate this incredible famine, COVID crisis, you could turn the situation around easily, and the whole world would back such an effort up. So I think there are still options, but they absolutely need a mobilization in the population, because you have to create an environment where Trump feels he can go this way, given the fact that he is surrounded by so many snakes and scoundrels that it is quite amazing.
Well, just to go back to a moment, you mentioned Tony Blinken, the designee for Biden to be Secretary of State. Blinken, it makes clear, that he wanted to have a bigger war in Syria. This goes back to why Michael Flynn was targeted when Trump came in and made him National Security Advisor. That this was the whole issue of the Obama involvement in arming and training terrorists in Syria as part of a regime change there. So this gets back to the whole question of the transition. I know you've been talking a lot recently about the whole question of the financial regime change, the global reset. I assume you saw the Treasury and financial appointees that Biden would make. Any comment on them? Janet Yellen, Neera Tanden?
Well, that is the policy of the financial oligarchy, the idea to give the power entirely to the central banks. You have the same thing going on with the European Union, now openly agreeing that the ESM is going to be used directly for the financing of the banks. The fig leaf that all these programs are there to support the governments has been basically dropped. And I think with Janet Yellen, we would see just an increasing effort to give all the powers to the central banks for the sake of saving a completely bankrupt financial system. So there is really an urgent need to act within the next weeks, if possible, because if Biden would be president, I think the world will take a turn to the worse very quickly.
Well, and another example of that is the discussion that's going on now with Stoltenberg of NATO about modernizing the nuclear arsenal. You mentioned before how disgusting it is to hear these people talk about human rights, about peace, and yet we see with NATO an aggressive stance, which led to a very significant comment from Ryabkov with a warning. How do the Russians view this?
Well, I mean, NATO is quite blatant about their idea to build a global NATO, to expand it into the Indo-Pacific, all with the aim to contain the rise of China, to encircle Russia. And what Ryabkov just reiterated, it's not the first time this was said by Putin, by Lavrov, before many times, that the idea of a limited nuclear war becomes more acceptable, and that the so-called low-yield nuclear weapons, which are being put up in Europe and elsewhere, that this is all lowering the threshold of nuclear war, and therefore, we're sitting on a complete strategic powder keg, and that's why such a summit in time to completely rearrange and change the strategic situation with a new security architecture, change the underlying axioms, go for a new Bretton Woods, a new world economic order, go for industrialization of the developing sector, which is so obvious and so urgent. If there would be a motion towards that now, you could probably, get all of these plans, eliminate all of these plans, but it does require a resolute action. It doesn't come from by itself.
And speaking of scandals within the EU, we had a report yesterday from your close colleague Jacques Cheminade on the situation in France. That's a mess now. I mean, what is Macron trying to do?
Well, I think he introduced or had introduced three legislations, which, as Jacques Cheminade is warning, eliminate basic rights, constitutional rights. I mean, you have this incredible case, of the brutality of the police. I mean, the French police is notorious since the French Revolution, at least, of having unbelievable brutality. So it now turns out, I think 30 people since the yellow vests were demonstrating lost one eye because the police is using these bullets, rubber bullets. 5 people lost their hand. There was this case of a incredibly brutal beating of a black music producer. Then you had this taking down the migrants' tents in Saint-Denis in Paris, where the police stormed these tents. People were sleeping. They were in their underwear or not dressed at all. And, it is an atmosphere where basically now, these legislations are supposed to, prevent religious freedom. It takes away basic questions of the Fifth Republic. So I think what we see right now is really, I mean, if you look at the totality, you see the QAnon, campaigns they come up with the most incredible stories. You have from some of the military calls for military tribunals, for martial law. I mean, this came from this General McInerney, which was then picked up by some people in the legal team of President Trump. All of this is really, furthering. I think people have a very hard time right now to look through what is fake news, what is propaganda, what is psychological warfare operations against the population. And I think the only way how you can keep your sanity is you have to focus on the solutions. There are solutions, and also the debate: is COVID just an invention of Bill Gates, or I mean, all these stories which are running around. Well, we can debate that at some other time, but if you go for the 4 laws of Linden-LaRouche, you declare Glass-Steagall, you make a separation of the banks, you protect the commercial banks, you let the investment banks let them do their own thing. If they can fix their books and get them in order, they should declare bankruptcy. You go for a national bank in every country in the tradition of Alexander Hamilton, or the Credit Institute for Reconstruction in Germany after the post-war, in the post-war period. Then you issue long-term credit to restart the economy. You connect these national banks with a new Bretton Woods system, and you start cooperation for the reconstruction of the world. If you focus on the solutions, you don't need to have an endless debate about who did what to whom. At this point, I think a lot of what is being said and written and in social media and all kinds of videos, it's designed to confuse the population, make them feel impotent and passive. I think the best way to counter that is that you focus on the solutions which have been developed by Lyndon LaRouche many years ago, but they're still completely valid. And one big issue, that will be a big issue at the upcoming conference of the Schiller conference, the 12th and 13th of December. And you have to rally for solutions, because otherwise I think we are in for an incredible dangerous period. But once you know what the solutions are, namely that you can have a new financial system, a new credit system, and that you focus on that and work with the Schiller Institute to form an international alliance to implement that, then I think you can keep your mental health, which otherwise for some people sometimes seems to be very difficult these days.
And I just want to add for people to be clear on this, a national bank would take power away from the private bankers who are the ones who fund these operations, the City of London and Wall Street, who have been behind all these frauds and attacks on the president. Now, Helga, you've presented quite a bit, which, when you look at it from above, you can see a world in disarray and in chaos. But there is something, a ray of optimism. The Chinese just landed another vehicle on the moon, the Chang'e 5. This is quite extraordinary, isn't this?
Yes, I think that shows clearly the way out of all of these troubles is that you have now 3 countries which landed on the moon: the United States, Russia, and China. And if these countries and other spacefaring nations, and that's about the only positive thing I can say about the European situation, because ESA is playing a very good role, and it gives optimism. I should mention ITER, the thermonuclear project in Karadash in France as well. But it's these kinds of forward-looking technologies like space research, space travel, thermonuclear fusion. If nation and ITER is a perfect example, there are, I think, 34 nations who cooperate on this project. I mean, that's the kind of look into the future. And Chang'e 5 is part of the very advanced Chinese program, including they will bring back samples of the soil of the moon, and part of it is going to be also from the backside of the moon. I don't think it's this mission, but a future one, to bring back helium-3, which is also relevant for thermonuclear fusion. So, if mankind would just cooperate on the common aims of mankind, of those things which will bring all of humanity forward, it would be very easy to fix all of this. So I think what we need is to have an international movement of people who basically are for this kind of cooperation. And it happens to be that also defines the 4th law of Lyndon LaRouche, that you need to have this increase in productivity, which comes from space research and travel, and naturally thermonuclear fusion, bringing the whole energy production into a completely higher energy flux density. So, I mean, there are these clear ways, including, the need to have a cultural renaissance, which will also be featured at the upcoming conference. So, I think there is reason of optimism, but you have to concentrate on that which will be the way out of this crisis. And that is what the Schiller Institute stands for.
And I would encourage all of our viewers then to go to the schillerinstitute.com and sign up for the online conference, December 12th and December 13th. Since it's online, you don't have to worry about standing in lines or crowds or anything, and you can participate by signing up. So it's schillerinstitute.com, December 12th and December 13th. Helga, you have anything you want to add in conclusion?
Well, I think it's important that people continuously study Plato, study Nicolaus of Cues, Kepler, Leibniz, read Schiller, read Shakespeare. You will find insights in the present strategic situation which you will not get from the contemporary media or the social media or any of these sources, because you have to develop these sources of inner strengths which only come from your own creative activity and you making intellectual breakthroughs, opening new horizons of understanding about the physical universe, about history, poetry, culture in general, other cultures. And only if you have that mental activity, be a truth-seeking person, that you can keep stability and mental health in such an incredibly challenging situation. And given the fact that because of COVID, we don't have an Advent, or at least not celebrated much in the usual form, it is really, and many people report that, young people in particular have much more depressions than usual, much more hard time to cope with the situation. And I think this idea of, reading LaRouche, because he gives you the key of how to read all of these original writers, because he has, really opened up the 2,500 years of European history for sure, but also not excluding access to the Indian culture, the Chinese culture, the Vedic writings. I think this inner mental activity, to become a truth-seeking person, is the key to come out of this period, with a winning perspective for all of humanity. So join the Schiller Institute, get in contact with us. That's the best thing you can do.
Okay, thank you very much. I just had an idea. Maybe someone should give Donald Trump a copy of Lynn's book, The Earth's Next 50 Years, for Christmas. It'd be well worth taking the time to read it. So, Helga, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week.
Till next week.